Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil Remake. In the last part, we finished off our duties in the mansion once again and made our way out to the caves below the mansion's courtyard. And now we're being chased down by LT again in the exclusive section of it like I brought up last time. So we just got the broken flamethrower last time, and what we need to do with that is throw that switch over there in that corner of this room and run past where LT was to get to this door here to put it on this hook. This hook will eventually slide back into the wall after a moment or two, so you need to get over here pretty quickly while avoiding LT. Not too hard given the scale of the room, but on a first playthrough it's very easy to let that timer lapse just because you might have thought it would stay open permanently and you go explore the room from there. The desk is cluttered with old beat up dolls and candles. Yeah, it's like we're suddenly in Resident Evil 4. A huge collection of various kinds of dolls. They're all faded and worn. Maybe it's a little closer to a certain section of Resi 8, actually, in that case. Be careful upon moving through this door, by the way, when you're in the water, because snakes do spawn in and start following you, but as long as you keep running forward, they don't really have much of a chance to catch up. I think I've maybe gotten hit twice there across my playthroughs or so. Well, this looks surprisingly cozy. Bunch of photographs featuring a young girl, depicting various scenes from her upbringing. Huh. This bed is still warm. Okay, well we got another jewelry box here. We're 2 for 2 on important things being in these, so let's take a look at this one. This one just opened straight up. And here we get a stone ring. We're gonna need that for later. There's also a family picture and some notes. There's something written on the back. November 10th, 1967. Progenitor virus administered. Jessica, administered virus type A, plasmalizing of tissue during cell activation. Virus fusion, negative. Action, disposed. Lisa, administered virus type B, plasmalizing of tissue during cell activation. Virus fusion, positive but delayed fusion. Body modification, observed constant results. Status, continue protective observation. George, action, terminated. November 30th, 1967. There's a journal left by someone. November 14th, 1967. I feel dizzy after what shot they gave me. I don't see Mom. Where did they take her? She promised that we would escape together. Did she escape alone and leave me behind? November 15th, 1967. I found Mom. We ate together. I was very happy. But she was a fake. Not my real mom. Same face, but different inside. Have to find Mom. Have to give face back to Mother. I got Mom's face back. Nobody can have my mom except me. I attach her face to me so she doesn't go away. Because Mom's sad when I meet her without her face. November 7th, 1907. From inside box, hint of Mommy. Maybe true Mother there. Stone box hard, it hurt. Steel rope and way. Can't see Mother because 4 stones. And thus why I've been calling LT probably becomes a little clear. She's Lisa Trevor, the daughter of the architect of the mansion. One of the darker moments in this franchise's lore that already has a lot of very dark things in it. Just a child being experimented on from a young age and continuing to be an experiment in some form. Over 30 years later from 1967. It's honestly really haunting and a very good addition, I think, to the series' lore. Let alone to the remake to make the stakes of how long this has been going on, make it be a little more clear. Leaving her bedroom behind, though, we're now actually back in the cabin outside the mansion that we went to before heading over towards the guardhouse. This is the best opportunity to go get the Magnum in the game if you haven't yet for one reason or another. But the main thing I want to do from this item box is grab the metal object we found earlier and make another stone and metal object like the one we found to access the guardhouse area to begin with. Now, if you think back to a door I've investigated in the LP in the past couple parts, you might realize what we need to do here. We need to head back to the main hall and also grab the other stone and metal object that's keeping the guardhouse area unlocked along the way. And thankfully that's a beeline level design there. I actually really like this moment as a good final farewell to the guardhouse region, because you're literally just backtracking through the section you haven't been to probably at this point in upwards of 2 or 3 hours on a good run. I think part of the reason I like this specific backtrack, though, is that it also activates a very specific part of my brain that Metroid uses when you return to an earlier section with a lot more stuff and you can just find more things. Despite the fact you're not really finding more things at this point in the game like this. Now that we have both stone and metal objects, we're nearing our end here in the time in the mansion. One more destination to really go, and it's one of the other longest lasting locks you can find in the game. If there's any items across the mansion you've yet to grab, especially if it's healing items or ammo, do that now. If it's ink ribbons, frankly, there's probably enough in the rooms left in the game that you don't really need to worry about that. Especially if you've been saving over successive slots rather than just overriding the same save slot over and over again. I don't know why. Even though it's always good to leave these types of areas behind in games like this because of the, you know, horror's trademark, there's always something slightly satisfying but empty feeling about leaving an area like this behind. And I'm not sure if it's like the sentimentality of the fun I had playing the game, tension or not along the way, or what. Though I think the strongest version of like that bittersweet empty feeling when you say goodbye to an area I've ever felt is actually the ending of Ys 8. Cause God, that is such a good Ys game. Something I distinctly remember thinking, looking at that camera angle, is while that previous door animation was playing during recording, I had a very tempting thought to just go open the front door anyway and let the Cerberus in, just to show off that cutscene. I ultimately decided against it, I believe, because I went, I'll probably take some stupid hits. It's not worth that. With the two stone and metal objects in place, they fit neatly into the door. We can now open it and approach our next major event set. I'd also recommend saving at this point on a first playthrough, by the way, especially using the typewriter like over the first floor of the dining hall, as what we're coming up on can be surprisingly dangerous for what it looks like. I also recommend having the Medal of Wolf and Medal of Eagle in your inventory after storing those away so long ago, as we're coming up to the point where we're actually going to need to use them. A big question of what to bring with you at this point in the game is actually which main weapon you want to use, especially if you're playing as Jill. I usually have enough ammo with the shotgun at this point that it remains my main weapon for the rest of the game, but if you've used that a little more willy-nilly against hunters and all that, your handgun probably still has enough handgun ammo left at this point that you can just switch to that and be good until the endgame swaps to the Magnum for damage reasons. Alright, down this entirely new little cave system, there is a new ladder, so let's see what lies at the bottom.
You're a bit of a mess-up. Chris, take a piece of the action.
Time for our proper boss fight against Lisa Trevor. She, like in other instances, is actually completely immortal here. The main thing is you want to push the rocks that she mentioned in that note off the ledge to let the chains on the coffin fall apart. She still really hurts here, but getting hit near the edge is actually an instant kill, which sucks. Just be sure to aim at her every now and then yourself, because otherwise they will attack either Barry or Wesker, depending on which campaign you're playing, and knocking them off in some cases. And thus exit stage left Lisa Trevor from the rest of the game.
I'll investigate this area a little further.
Like I briefly touched on earlier, I think Lisa Trevor is a really cool idea, and she's got a really haunting appearance and sound design. My biggest issue with her mechanically is that I think they actually underutilize her, though. Like, she's there for a lot of background lore about the mansion and all that, and the early experiments that happened in this area, but I think she needed to show up either a little more often, or maybe even follow you around slightly adjacent to Mr. X from the original Resident Evil 2, where there were more forced encounters with her. Even if you could just get around her instead of having to take her down to get extra items like you do Mr. X and Nemesis in their original games. A circular depression, there's a wolf-shaped emblem carved inside, and thus we place the Medal of Wolf here, and on the opposite side of the fountain there's another depression with an eagle in it where we need to place the Medal of Eagle. I think the best way they could have maybe handled Lisa Trevor, on top of what's already in the game, is if they added a difficulty mode somewhat akin to the already existent One Dangerous Zombie, where she's maybe boosted in speed a little bit and actively has more appearances throughout the mansion to try and scare you. think the best way to handle that would be like the most common room she could show up in randomly, like the main hall, the dining hall, some of the hallways that are larger, like the one where the east and west safe rooms are on the first floor of the mansion and all that. With those medals placed in, though, this fountain has opened up to reveal an elevator, and this leads us not only towards the endgame area, but here in the GameCube release, using the elevator also triggers our disc swap. Like Resident Evil 0, they couldn't fit this game all on one GameCube UMD disc, so they had to make a second one. Although, if memory serves, I remember reading that in development early on before they had someone from Nintendo come to help, and future me confirm this, whether or not I'm right on this or not. They almost had the game on 3 discs because of how intensive things were, and honestly, I think that would have been really cool to see, but also really annoying at the same time. The sign reads, will not open unless in first-class emergency. At the end of the day, I guess the final area being where the disc swap is makes a little bit of sense because of the fact that once you get here, in most cases, you're probably going to not need to head back to the earlier parts of the mansion and all that. Meanwhile, if there was multiple discs, you'd probably be swapping back and forth depending on which area you entered. Like, the mansion's disc 1, the guardhouse is disc 2, then this is disc 3 or something like that. Welcome to the lab. I'm not showing my inventory there because I'm going to pick up this ink ribbon and show my current inventory because I'm going to actually drop a save here. I've recommended decent save points throughout the game, but on an average playthrough of this, or especially the original Resident Evil, I only save once or twice, and they're usually when I first reach the guardhouse and around here just to lock in everything I've done. You know, speaking of the game's development, I'm surprised I haven't talked about this specific fact. If memory serves, I believe I looked into this during the Zero LP and I forgot what I found on that. A notable thing about Remake is that because the GameCube had, I believe, a faster loading method than the PlayStation at the time, specifically I think due to the UMDs, originally, early versions of this game didn't actually have the door transitions, but test players found it really weird to not have them, so they added them back in. I think that was the thing in Remake. It may have been Zero. I might even be thinking of something else at this point. At that same time, that does have the energy of like one of those stories that just spread because of the more advanced technology, and if it wasn't necessarily true. Ooh, crunchy. We want to come over here and grab our second MO disc. We found one back at the Tiger statue room earlier in the LP. The latter 2 of the 3 we need are both here in the lab. Now, the door back over by that MO disc is locked at the moment. We need to actually go and lock that ourselves down on the lower floor first. But notably, at least in the early sections here of the lab, every single enemy you're going to find is just a standard zombie. They can still become Crimson Heads if you take too long, especially if you don't take off their head or burn them. But there's not enough of the zombies here to really make it feel worth doing that, as the lab is a very brief section of the game, even compared to the guardhouse. So the way this section is structured right now is that the previous room we were in is in the shape of a giant O. There are 4 doors in there, not counting the staircase we came down from. We can only open 2 of them, and the double doors that are also open don't have anything for us quite yet because we need something from this room first. Though you can grab a flash grenade in that room if you wanted to, but we're going to grab that when we go there either way. This room has one of my favorite updated puzzles in the game. In here, we got 2 X-rays we can find, and upon picking up the second one, we'll get a good hint on what to do with them. A memo on the message board catches your attention. There's something scrawled on the notepad. To use the electronic door, place the initials in alphabetical order. Meanwhile, over here, we got a note. Researcher's letter. June 8th, 1998. My dearest Ada, by the time you read this letter, I will no longer be the person you once knew. The results of my test came out today, and as I suspected, it came out positive. I feel like I'm teetering on the edge of reason just thinking about my impending doom. I would give anything not to have to become one of them. As far as I know, you are not infected. I sincerely hope things do not reach such a desperate pass, but if it has turned out that you are now the last person remaining alive, I want you to get the material from the visual data room. Then activate the self-destruct system in the power room and escape from here. Please do everything in your power to make this whole accident public. If everything is still running normally, you should be able to release all the locks using the security system. I've set up the terminal in the small security room so that you can log into the system using my name and your name as the password. You'll need another password to release the lock to the door in the basement level 2 where the visual data room is located. As a safety measure, I've coded that password into an X-ray picture, a ruined genogram. I know you, and I'm sure you'll be able to work it out without any trouble. There's just one more thing, and it is my last request. I hope you never have to lay eyes on me in this state, but if you do happen to run into me in my hideous form, I beg you to put me out of my misery. I hope you understand. Thank you, Ada. Yours truly, John. John, Ada. And yes, it is that Ada. But let's talk about the puzzle he was talking about. Here we got an X-ray for Alex Bechet, and over here we got one for Ed Fisher. Notice the initials, AB and EF. And if we check the other X-rays we found, we got Clark David, and if we check the other one we have, it's for a Gail Holland. So that means we have X-rays for an AB, a CD, an EF, and a GH. Put Clark David's X-ray on the left, empty spot, and Gail Holland's on the right, and then we want to go over here and turn off the lights. In doing so, one organ on every X-ray is going to glow red. In this case, the colon, the esophagus, the liver, and the lungs. Taking the first letter from each of those gives us our password that we need on top of John and Ada, Cell. Notably, that is a different third password there than what was in the original game. In that place was Mole as the third password. But they changed it up here in the remake just to mess with veterans, though I do believe if you enter that password instead, where we need to enter it, you'll actually hear the sound effect that was the voice of Tofu from the bonus difficulty in Resident Evil 2. I think that's a funny little shout out. And at least it gives the original password a purpose that's just like, that's fun. There are more doors in that direction, but 2 of them are locked, so we're now going to go over to the other room we can access here in this O-shaped room, the double doors I brought up earlier. Barring the visual upgrades on the whole, the lab is probably the most one-to-one area from the original game, because if you knew how to get from the beginning to the end of the lab in the PlayStation version, even with the 1 or 2 changes to puzzles or twists and turns they give you, you will pretty much make it through no problem if you knew the original route. Over here's the flash grenade I brought up earlier, might as well grab that. And now we want to go investigate the computer and the document that was on the desk over here. Let's start with the document. V-Act Researcher's Note. There is now evidence that when the host loses consciousness, the body goes into a dormant state. During this time, the virus becomes active and rapidly transforms and reconstructs the basic composition of the body. The host eventually mutated into a humanoid creature. We call them V-Acts. Its speed and amazing muscular development are particularly noteworthy. After transformation, it becomes more agile and aggressive. Already 4 of our researchers have died trying to feed it, turning the place into an instant bloodbath. Ever since this tragic and barbaric accident, we've decided to call its kind Crimson Heads. That dangerous and precious prototype specimen can't be left there. We have to figure out a way to deal with it. Termination is definitely not an option. We finally decided to freeze the specimen and confine the body inside the basement of the backyard cemetery. So that's where the prototype Crimson Head we fought after getting the death masks came from. I won't lie, when I first played the remake, I thought the implication was that that specific Crimson Head was meant to be George Trevor's zombified corpse, but timeline-wise, that doesn't really line up at all with anything else the game gives you. Alright, log in, John. Password Ada gets us into the first layer of security. We can unlock the door here on this floor, over back towards where we actually got the passwords for this computer. So there's a couple things we can do in there, but now we need to use the password cell to unlock the basement 2nd floor door. If you input mole here, you'll hear Tofu sound effect future me. See if you can go grab that for me. Thank you. You can effectively visit either of these 2 rooms first, and it won't really matter given the small scale of the lab in general. But I tend to go for the one here on the floor we're currently on before heading up to the room that we had to get the extra password to unlock. I just think it works out a little bit better that way. Won't lie though, I think the presentation for that computer is neat. Nice old retro-styled OS and all that. I've always missed how the original game did it, where you also got to see Jill or Chris actually type on the keyboard and like fist pump when they got stuff right. Mind you, in a way, that's also a very good way to kind of parallel how Resi 1 and Remake kind of feel compared to each other. If Resident Evil 1 is the schlocky late 70s, early 80s B-horror movie that has a cult following, Remake is the gritty, early to mid-2000s remake that the fanbase didn't like at the time. Only at the time the fanbase loved this game, so that's not exactly a one-to-one thing, but you get what I mean. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 12, we're going to dive even deeper into the lab, getting close to the end of the process. See you guys then.